All right, so let's take a look at the Miami Beach hospitality scene and how it compares to the rest of the U.S. for October. You've given me some reports with data about hotel sales and performance and even some upcoming construction. So let's dive into it.
Well, the contrast is really striking right off the bat. Miami Beach is doing fantastic with over $553 million in hotel sales in just the first 10 months of 2024. But things are looking a bit different across the U.S.
Oh, wow. Miami Beach is really going against the grain. So is that spread out across a bunch of sales or just a couple of big ones?
It's a little bit of both, actually. The sale of the W South Beach makes up over 70% of that activity. That one sale was $400 million.
Wow, that's a ton of money just for one sale. Is that normal for Miami Beach?
It's definitely something to take note of. That W South Beach sale was the second largest in the history of Miami Beach. The only sale bigger than that was the One Hotel South Beach sale back in February 2019.
So Miami Beach is just doing its own thing while the rest of the country is slowing down.
Yeah, kind of. The third quarter nationally saw a bit of a freeze in hotel deals going through. Like, everyone's waiting to see what happens before they make any big decisions. The number of properties that actually changed hands dropped by a third compared to last year.
Yeah, I bet all the talk about interest rates in the election has people a bit nervous.
Yeah, exactly. Uncertainty makes people cautious, especially when you're talking about big investments like hotels.
That makes sense. But even with everything slowing down nationally, there are still some big names making moves in some key markets. The report mentioned Host Hotels buying up the One Hotel Embassy Suites in Nashville and the One Hotel in New York.
Yeah, those are great examples of strategic acquisitions. Host Hotels is essentially betting on the long-term value of those properties.
Hmm.
They're in great locations and they should hold their value even if there's a downturn in the market.
It really makes you wonder if these big players know something the rest of the market doesn't. Do you think they're anticipating a rebound or they're just more willing to take a risk?
I think it's probably a little of both. They're looking at the big picture and thinking about more than just what's happening right now in the market.
That makes sense. And then there's the opposite situation with Park Hotels and Resorts in San Francisco. They ended up defaulting on their debt payments for a huge portfolio of 3,000 rooms. Sounds like they made a big bet that didn't pay off.
Yeah, San Francisco just goes to show how much local market conditions can affect a hotel's success. That portfolio lost $1 billion in value since 2019, so just being in a good location isn't always enough.
Wow. So we have Miami Beach doing great despite what's going on nationally, big players making strategic moves, and then cautionary tales like San Francisco. It's crazy how all these different things are affecting the hospitality landscape.
Yeah.
But let's get back to Miami Beach for a second. The report mentioned another sale that was interesting, the North Bay in Miami. It sounded like the buyer might just keep the hotel running, even though there are already approved plans to redevelop it.
That is interesting, especially with interest rates going up and lenders being a lot more cautious. Looks like that buyer would rather get some quick returns from operating the hotel instead of waiting for the potential gains from redevelopment.
Yeah, like why not make money now while you wait for a better time to rebuild?
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty smart strategy. We were talking earlier about potential distress sales in Miami Beach because of refinancing challenges hotels are facing.
Right.
Did any of those end up happening?
So far, no. But the report did mention 6 properties that have loans maturing by December 2025. One of those is already on a watch list, so it will be interesting to see what happens with those over the next few months.
So there's still some potential trouble in Miami Beach despite all the good things happening. Okay, so we talked about all the buying and selling, but what about how hotels are actually performing? What did that look like in Miami Beach in October?
Well, the report focused on the year-to-date performance through September, and there was a small increase in RevPAR of about 0.4%. RevPAR is revenue per available room. It's basically a measure of how well a hotel is doing financially.
Gotcha. Thanks for explaining that. So Miami Beach is doing pretty well, even if the growth is small. So what's behind that growth?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. The RevPAR increase was actually because occupancy went up, which means they were filling up more rooms. But that came with a decrease in ADR. That stands for average daily rate. It's basically the average price people are paying for a room. So they're filling up more rooms, but at lower prices.
Oh, so it's getting cheaper to stay in Miami Beach. Bet tourists are happy about that.
Well, it's really just a shift in the market. Remember how we talked about those urban destinations that were lagging behind? Well, they've finally recovered and are starting to compete again. So Miami Beach has more guests, but they're having to lower their prices to stay competitive.
So even though Miami Beach is doing better than the national market, it's still facing its own challenges.
Exactly. And this trend in Miami Beach is actually opposite of what's happening nationally. Nationally, hotel capitalization rates are going up, and they're expected to peak in mid to late 2025. Basically, this means that investors want bigger returns on their hotel investments, which means they think hotels are a bit riskier than other options right now.
Oh, wow. So nationally, hotels are maybe not looking as good as other investments.
Hmm.
And in Miami Beach, they're filling more rooms, but having to lower their prices. So where does this leave the future of Miami Beach's hospitality industry? Is it in trouble?
Not necessarily. Remember, even with the price changes, Miami Beach is still seeing more people staying in hotels. And the report predicts that overall performance should actually improve in the fourth quarter of 2024.
Oh, okay, that's good. What makes them think that?
Well, one thing is that Miami Beach has some big events coming up, like Art Basel and a Taylor Swift concert. That's going to bring in a ton of visitors.
I guess you could say Taylor Swift is a big deal in the hotel industry now, too. But the report also mentioned that new hotels are opening up in Miami Beach. Wouldn't that create more competition and maybe offset some of that increased demand?
Yeah, you're right. The fourth quarter will see a few new hotels opening, which means there will be more rooms available.
So it's kind of a tug of war.
Hmm.
More demand from big events, but also more supply from new hotels. So what does that mean overall?
I'd say the outlook for Miami Beach's fourth quarter is cautiously optimistic. There are a lot of things happening at once. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Okay, so we've got increasing demand and new hotels popping up at the same time. And speaking of new hotels, it sounds like Miami Beach is seeing a construction boom again after a few years of not much happening.
Yeah, it's definitely picking up again. The report said there are 3 new properties that are going to open in 2024 with about 500 rooms total. One of them, the Citizen M Miami South Beach, already opened in August.
Oh, wow. And 2 more are going to open before the end of the year. That's a lot of new rooms in a short amount of time. What kind of impact do you think that'll have on the hotels that are already there?
Well, it will definitely mean more competition, especially for the hotels that appeal to the same kind of travelers. We might see some hotels getting a bit more aggressive with their pricing, and maybe they'll try some creative marketing to try to get more guests.
So it's not just about adding more rooms. It's about how these new hotels fit into the market. And it sounds like this isn't just a 2024 thing either. The report mentioned some projects that are coming in 2025 too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 2 more hotels are scheduled to open in 2025, including that luxury Thompson South Beach. And on top of that, over 1,100 rooms are in the final planning stages.
Yeah.
The big one there is the Grand Hyatt Miami Beach Convention Center with a whopping 800 rooms.
800 rooms. That's a huge hotel. It sounds like Miami Beach is getting ready to host even bigger events and conferences now.
Yeah, I think you're right. A hotel that big, especially one with a name like Grand Hyatt, could be a real game changer for the Miami Beach Convention Center. It could attract all kinds of conferences and events that might not have considered Miami Beach before because there wasn't enough space.
So it's not just about more rooms. It's about making the city able to host bigger events, which is a smart move considering how much money those big events bring in. But didn't the report also mention that there might be some problems with these big plans?
Yeah, they did say that rising interest rates and insurance costs could cause delays or changes to these big projects. Those things can really mess with budgets and timelines.
So even though everyone is excited about these new developments, they might not happen as smoothly as planned.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. It shows how complicated it is.
You have the market forces that desire to build, and then the risk that always comes with big construction projects. But even with those challenges, it seems like Miami Beach is thinking long-term and investing in its future as a top travel destination.
For sure. It's like they're saying we're not just riding the wave, we're building the next one.
Yeah, and that proactive approach is probably why Miami Beach always does better than other markets.
I think that's a big part of it. Miami Beach has always been good at adapting and changing to keep up with what people want.
Which reminds me, remember how we were talking about how prices are softening in Miami Beach? Do you think that will continue with all these new hotels opening? Is that something to worry about?
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. More competition usually means prices go down, but it can also lead to hotels trying new things to stand out and give people a unique experience.
So it could actually lead to more creativity and a more interesting mix of hotels.
Yeah, exactly. It might not be a bad thing. It just means hotels need to be smarter and more adaptable.
So the report focused on the year-to-date numbers through September. But it sounds like the really interesting stuff is what's coming up next. Miami Beach has all these things happening at once: rising interest rates, more competition, new hotels opening, and big events driving demand. It's a wild mix of challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, you said it. There are a lot of moving parts. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all works out over the next few months and to see how Miami Beach handles this ever-changing landscape.
So it really feels like we're at some kind of turning point for Miami Beach. What do you think is going to be the most important thing that determines its success over the next few years?
That's a tough one to answer. I mean, Miami Beach is pretty resilient, and that's because of a few things. It's got a great brand, it's good at adapting to trends, and it has a diverse economy that isn't just based on tourism.
That's true. We've been talking so much about the hospitality industry, but Miami Beach is more than just hotels and beaches, right?
Right. There's a strong financial sector, a growing tech scene, and a vibrant arts and culture scene. All of those things contribute to the city's economy and help it weather any storms.
So even if things slow down for tourism, other parts of the economy can keep things going. It's like a safety net that makes Miami Beach a better investment.
Exactly. And we can't forget about innovation. Miami Beach is always coming up with creative solutions and reinventing itself to stay ahead of the game.
Like those old Art Deco buildings that they turned into boutique hotels. That's a perfect example of combining the old and the new.
Exactly. And with all the new developments that are in the works and the focus on attracting big events, Miami Beach looks like it's going to stay a top destination for a long time.
It sounds like the person who provided us with all this data made a good investment in Miami Beach.
Yeah, based on these reports, things are looking good. There are some challenges ahead, but there are also a lot of positive signs. Miami Beach has a history of success, and it looks like they're in a good position to keep that going.
This has been a really interesting look at the Miami Beach hospitality scene. We've gone through the numbers, looked at the trends, and heard some interesting stories along the way. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most from all this information?
For me, it's just how resilient and adaptable Miami Beach is. They're not just reacting to things, they're actually shaping their own future.
It's a dynamic city with a lot of energy. No wonder people love it so much.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with something to think about. We talked about how Miami Beach is dealing with a changing economy, but what about other destinations? Can they learn from Miami Beach's approach? Can other cities copy their strategies? It's something to consider as you keep looking at hospitality and real estate.
That's a great point. It makes our listener think about how to apply this knowledge to other places besides Miami Beach. Well, thanks for joining me for this deep dive. It's always great to discuss these complicated topics with you.
The pleasure is all mine. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those great questions.